Chapter 26, the last chapter of Ramona. The captain's house faced the east. Just as day broke and the light streamed in at the open door, Ramona's eyes unclosed. Felipe and Aunt Ree were both by her side with a look of bewildered terror. She gazed at them. There now. You're just shut your eyes and go right off to sleep again, honey, said Aunt Ree composedly, laying her hand on Ramona's eyelids and compelling them down. We are here, Felipe and me, and we are going to stay. I allow you need to be afraid of nothing. Go to sleep, honey. The eyelids quivered beneath Aunt Ree's fingers. Tears forced their way and rolled slowly down the cheeks. The lips trembled. The voice strove to speak, but it was only like the ghost of a whisper. The faint question that came, Felipe. Yes, dear, I am here too, breathed Felipe. Go to sleep, we will not leave you. And again Ramona sank away into the merciful sleep which was saving her life. The longer she can sleep, the better, said Aunt Ree with a sigh, deep drawn like a groan. I allow I dread to see her really come to, till be was in the fuss, she'll have to live it all over again. But Aunt Ree did not know what forces of fortitude had been gathering in Ramona's soul during these last bitter days. Out of her gentle constancy had been woven the heroic fiber of which martyrs are made. This and her inextinguishable faith had made her strong, as were those of old who had trial of cruel mocking, wandered about, being destitute, afflicted, and tormented, wandered in deserts and in mountains, and in dens and caves of the earth. When she waked the second time, it was with a calm, almost beatific, B-E-A-T-I-F-I-C. When she waked the second time, it was with a calm, almost beatific smile that she gazed on Felipe and whispered, How did you find me, dear Felipe? It was rather by the motions of her lips than by any sound that he knew the words. She had not yet strength enough to make an audible sound. When they laid her baby on her breast, she smiled again and tried to embrace her, but was too weak. Pointing to the baby's eyes, she whispered, gazing earnestly at Felipe, Alessandro. A convulsion passed over her face as she spoke the word, and the tears flowed. Felipe could not speak. He glanced helplessly at Aunt Ree, who promptly responded, Now, honey, don't you talk. 'Tain't good for you, and Felipe and me, we are in powerful hurry to get you strong and well, and tote ye out here this. Aunt Ree stopped. No substantive. So let me go back to that other word. That other word called... What was that word, guys? Give me a second. Should not string out the audible sound, smoking, pointing, whisper, tormented. Strong. Yep, I look after everything. Okay, no substantive. Oh, beatific, right? No, it's beatific. What does beatific mean? Beatific, substantive. Beatific, substantive. So Aunt Ree stopped. No substantive inner vocabulary answered her need at that moment. I allow you can go in a week. If anything don't go again, you're more and I see now. But if you get to talking, there's no telling when you'll get up. You just shut up, honey. We'll look out after everything. Feebly, Ramona turned her grateful, inquiring eyes on Felipe. Her lips framed the words, With you? Yes, dear, home with me, said Felipe, clasping her hand in his. I've been searching for you all this time. An anxious look came into the sweet face. Felipe knew what it meant, how often he had seen it in the olden time. He feared to shock her by the sudden mention of the Señora's death, yet that would harm her less than continued anxiety. I'm alone, dear Ramona, he whispered. There is no one but you, my sister, to take care of me. My mother has been dead a year. If they're not brother and sister, they should probably get married, no? The eyes dilated, then filled with sympathetic tears. Dear Felipe, she sighed, but her heart took courage. Felipe's phrase was like one inspired. Another duty, another work, another loyalty waiting for Ramona. Not only her child to live for, but to take care of Felipe. Ramona would not die. Youth, a mother's love, a sister's affection, and duty on the side of life. The battle was won, and won quickly, too. To the simple Cahuilas, it seemed like a miracle, and they looked on Aunt Ree's weather-beaten face with something akin to a superstitious reverence. They themselves were not ignorant of the value of the herb by means of which she had wrought the marvelous cure. but they had made repeated experiments with it upon Ramona without success. It must be that there had been some potent spell in Aunt Ree's handling. They would hardly believe her when, in answer to their persistent questioning, she reiterated the assertion that she had used nothing except the hot water and old man, which was her name for the wild wormwood, and which, when explained to them, impressed them greatly as having no doubt some significance in connection with the results of her preparation of the leaves. Rumors about Felipe ran swiftly throughout the region. The presence in the Cahuila village of rich Mexican gentlemen who spent gold like water and kept mounted men riding day and night after anything he wanted for his sick sister was an event which, in the atmosphere of that lonely country, loomed into colossal proportions. He had traveled all over California with 4 horses in search of her. He was only waiting till she was well to take her to his home in the south, and then he was going to arrest the man who had murdered her husband and have him hanged. Yes, hanged. Small doubt about that, or if the law cleared him, there was still the bullet. This rich senor would see him shot if rope were not to be had. Jim Farrar heard these tales and quaked in his guilty soul. The rope he had small fear of, for well he knew the temper of San Diego County juries and judges, but the bullet, that was another thing, and these Mexicans were like Indians in their vengeance. Time did not tire them, and their memories were long. Farrar cursed the day he had let his temper get the better of him on that lonely mountainside. How much the better? Nobody but he himself knew, nobody he and Ramona, and even Ramona did not know the bitter whole. She knew that Alessandro had no knife and had gone forward with no hostile intent, but she knew nothing beyond that. Only the murderer himself knew that the dialogue which he had reported to the judge and jury to justify his act was an entire fabrication of his own, and that instead of it had been spoken but 4 words by Alessandro, and those were, "Senor, I will explain." And that even after the first shot had pierced his lungs and the blood was choking in his throat, and he had still run a step or 2 farther with his hand uplifted deprecatingly and made one more effort to speak before he fell to the ground dead. Callous as Farrar was, and clear as it was in his mind that killing an Indian was no harm, he had not liked to recall the pleading anguish in Alessandro's tone and in his face as he fell. He had not liked to recall this even before he heard of this rich Mexican brother-in-law who had appeared on the scene, and now he found the memory still more unpleasant. Fear is a wonderful goad to remorse. Goad, G-O-A-D. Fear is a wonderful goad to remorse. There was another thing, too, which to his great wonder had been apparently overlooked by everybody, at least. Nothing bad, or nothing had been said about it, but the bearing of it on his case, if the case were brought up a second time and minutely investigated, would be most unfortunate. And this was that the only clue, C-L-E-W, I guess like only evidence, the only clue he had to the fact of Alessandro's having taken his horse was that the poor, half-crazed fellow had left his own well-known gray pony in the corral in place of the horse he took. A strange thing, surely, for a horse thief to do. Cold sweat burst out onto Farrar's head. More than once, as he realized how this, coupled with the well-known fact of Alessandro's liability to attacks of insanity, might be made to tell against him if he should be brought to trial for the murder. He was as cowardly as he was cruel. Never yet were the two traits separate in human nature, and after a few days of this torturing suspense and apprehension, he suddenly resolved to leave the country, if not forever, at least for a few years, till his brother-in-law should be out of the way. He lost no time in carrying out this his resolution, and it was well he did. And it was well he did not, for it was only 3 days after he had disappeared that Felipe walked into Judge Wells' office one morning to make inquiries relative to the preliminary hearing which had been held there in the matter of the murder of the Indian, Alessandro Assis, by James Farrar. And when the judge, taking down his books, read to Felipe his notes of the case and went to say, "Farrar's testimony is true, Ramona's, the wife's, must be false, and at any rate her testimony will not be worth a straw with any jury," Felipe sprang to his feet and cried, "She of whom you speak is my foster sister, and by God, senor, if I can find that man, I will shoot him as I would a dog, and I'll see then if a San Diego County jury will hang me for ridding the country of such a brute." And Felipe would have been as good as his word. It was a wise thing Farrar had done in making his escape. When Aunt Marie heard that Farrar had fled the country, she pushed up her spectacles and looked reflectively at her informant. It was young Merrill. "Fled the country? Has he?" she said. "While he can flee as many countries as he likes, and 't won't do him no good. I know you folks here don't seem to think killing an Injun's any murder, but I say 'tis, and you'll all get it brung home to yer afore your day. If 'tain't brung one way, till be another. You just mind what I say and don't you forget it. Now this miserable murderer, this Ferrari that's lighted out earlier, he's nothing more than a skunk, but he's got the Lord after him now. It'll just, well, he's gone. It's just as well he's gone. I never did believe in hanging. I never could. It's just 2 men dead instead of 1. I don't want to see no man hang, no martyr what he's done. And I don't want to see no man shot down, neither, no matter what he's done. And this here Felipe, he's that high strung. He had a shot that for her any minute quicker than lightning if he'd catch him. So it's better all around here he's lit out. But I tell you now, he ain't made much by going. That engine he murdered, I have to relate this for like a whole fucking page. The engine he murdered follow he night and day till he dies, and long after he'll wish he was dead after he does die. I allow he will now. He'll be just like a man I know back in Tennessee. I want him but a mite then, but I never forgot it. 'Tis a great country for gourds. East Tennessee is where I was raised, and there was 2 houses and a fence between them, and these gourds are run all over the fence, and one of the children picked one of them gourds and they fit about it, and then the women took it up, their children's mothers, you know, and they got fighting about it, and then to last the men took it up and they fit, and Rao, he got his butcher knife and he ground it up, and he picked a quarrel with Claiborne and he cut him into pieces. They hit him up for it, and somehow they cleared him. I don't see how they ever did, but they put it off, and last they got him free, and he lived on there a spell, but he couldn't stand it. Appeared like he never had no peace, and he come over to our just and say Jake, they all is called Daddy Jake or Uncle Jake. Jake said I can't stand it living here. Why, says Daddy, the law of the country cleared you. Yes, says he, well the law of God ain't, and I got Claiborne Allers is with me. Like always with me. There ain't no any path, there ain't any path so narrow, but he's a walking in it by my side all day, and come night I sleep with him to one side and my wife the other, and I can't stand it. Them's their very words I heard him say, and I wasn't anything but a mite, but I didn't forget it. Well, sir, he went west, way out here to California, and he couldn't stay there another, and he come back home again, and I was bigger than a gal grown, and Daddy says some, I hear him. Well, says he, did Claiborne follow you? Yeah, says he followed. I'll never get shut him in this world. He's always close to me everywhere. You see, it was just his conscience whipping him. That's all it was. At least that's all I think it was. Though there was those that said it was Claiborne's ghost, and that'll be the way till be with this miserable Ferrari. And that'll be the way with this miserable Ferrari. He'll live to wish he'd let himself be hanged or shot, or every which way to get out of his misery. Young Merrill listened with unwonted gravity to Henri's earnest words. They reached a depth in his nature which had been long untouched, a stratum, so to speak, which lay far beneath the surface. The character of the Western frontiersman is often a singular accumulation of such strata, the training and beliefs of his earliest days overlain by successions of unrelated and violent experiences like geological deposits. Underneath the exterior crust of the most hardened and ruffianly nature often remains, its forms not yet quite fossilized, a realm full of the devout customs, doctrines, religious influences which the boy knew and the man remembers. By sudden upheaval in some great catastrophe or struggle in his nature or in his mature life, these all come again into the light, assembly, catechism, definitions which he learned in his childhood and has not thought of since, ring in his ears, and he is thrown into all manner of confusions and inconsistencies of feeling and speech by this clashing of the old and new man within him. It was much in this way that Henri's words smote upon young Merrill. He was not many years removed from the sound of a preaching of the straightest New England Calvinism. The wild frontier life had drawn him in and under as in a whirlpool, but he was New Englander yet at heart. That's so, Henri, he exclaimed. That's so. I don't suppose a man that's committed murder will ever have any peace in this world, nor in the next neither, without he repents. But you see, this horse stealing business is different. 'Tain't murder to kill a horse thief. Any way you can fix it, everybody admits that a fella that's caught horse stealing had ought to be shot, and he will be too, I tell you, in this country. A look of impatient despair spread over Henri's face. I ain't no patience left with you, she said. You're talking about stealing horses as if horses was more than human beings. But land They all go, this engine, he was crazy. Y'all knowed it. That Ferrari knowed it. Do you think if he'd been stealing the horse, he'd have left his own horse in the corral, same as you might say leaving his yard to say to was he done it? And the horse are tied up in plain sight in front of his house for anybody to see? Left his own horse, so he did, retorted Merrill, a poor, miserable, knock-kneed old pony that went worth $20, and Jim's horse was worth $200 and cheap at that. That ain't neither here nor there in what we're saying, persisted Henri. I ain't speaking on tis a swap of horses where I say he wasn't trying to cover up that he took the horse. We say used to horse thieves in Tennessee, but I never heard one yet that left his name for a reference behind him to show which road he took, and fastened their stolen critter to his front gate when he got home. I allow me and you hadn't better say anything much more on the subject, for I allow we are bound to quarrel if we do, and nothing that Merle said could draw another word out of Henri in regard to Alessandro's death. But there was another subject on which she was tireless and her speech eloquent. It was the kindness and goodness of the Cahuilla people. The last vestige of her prejudice against Indians had melted and gone in the presence of their simple-hearted friendliness. I'll never hear a word said again, never to my longest day, she said. The way the poor things had just stripped themselves to get things for Ramona beat all ever I see among white folks, and I've been around more than most, and they weren't looking for no pay neither, for they didn't know till Felipe and me come that she had any folks anywhere, and they'd had taken care on her till she died just the same. The sick allers as took care on among them, they said. So long as any of them, he's got a thing left. That's where they get, that's the way they are raised. I allow white folks might take a lesson on him and that, and there's heaps of other things too. Oh, I done talking again Injuns now, don't you forget it, but I know for all that, it won't make any difference. Pairs like there couldn't nobody believe anything in this world without seeing to themselves. I was that way too. I allow I ain't got no call to talk, but I just wish the whole world could see what I've seen, that's all. It was a sad day in the village when Ramona and her friends departed heartily as the kindly people rejoiced in her having found such a protector for herself and her child. And deeply as they felt Felipe's and Aunt Ree's goodwill and gratitude towards him, they were yet conscious of a loss, of a void. The gulf between them and the rest of the world seemed to find anew. Their sense of isolation deepened. Their hopeless poverty emphasized. Ramona, wife of Alessandro, had been as their sister, one of them as such. She would have had share in all their life had to offer, but its utmost was nothing, was but hardship and deprivation. She was being borne away from it like one rescued, not so much from death as from a life worse than death. The tears streamed down Ramona's face as she bade them farewell. She embraced again and again the young mother who had for so many days suckled her child, even, it was said, depriving her own hardier, H-A-hard-I-E-R, babe, that Ramona should not suffer. Sister, you have given me my child, she cried. I can never thank you. I'll pray for you all my life. Sister, you have given me my child, she cried. I can never thank you. She made no inquiries as to Felipe's plans. Unquestioningly, like a little child, she resigned herself into his hands. A power greater than hers was ordering her way. Felipe was its instrument. No other voice spoke to guide her. The same old simplicity of acceptance which had characterized her daily life in her girlhood and kept her serene and sunny then, serene under trials, sunny in a routine of little duties, had kept her serene through all the afflictions and calm, if not sunny under all the burdens of her later life, and it did not desert her even now. Henri gazed at her with a sentiment as near to veneration as her dry, humorous, practical nature was capable of feeling. I allow, I don't know, but I should come to believing in saints too, she said. If I was to live alongside her, that gal, pairs like she was something more than human, to beats me plumb out. The way she takes her troubles, there's some would say she hadn't no feeling, but I allow she has more in most folks. I can see it ain't that. I allow I didn't never expect to think well of praying to pictures and strings of beads and such, but if 'tis that keeps her up the way she's kept up, I allow there's more in it and it's head credit for. I ain't going to say any more again it, nor again Injuns. Parents like I'm getting heaps of new ideas into my head these days. I'll turn Injun maybe before I get through. The farewell to Henri was hardest of all. Ramona clung to her as to a mother. At times she felt that she would rather stay by her side than go home with Felipe, and then she reproached herself for the thought. As for treason and ingratitude, Felipe saw the feeling and did not wonder it. Dear girl, he thought, it is the nearest she has ever come to knowing what a mother's love is like. And he lingered in San Bernardino week after week on the pretense that Ramona was not yet strong enough to bear the journey home, when in reality his sole motive for staying was his reluctance to deprive her of Aunt Ree's wholesome and cheering companionship. Aunt Ree was busily at work on a rag carpet for the Indian agent's wife. She had just begun it, had woven only a few inches on that dreadful morning when the news of Alessandro's death reached her. It was of her favorite pattern, the hit-or-miss pattern, as she called it, not set stripes, a regular alternation of colors, but ball after ball of the indiscriminately mixed tints woven back and forth on a warp of a single color. The constant variety in it, the unexpectedly harmonious blending of the colors, gave her delight and afforded her a subject, too, of not unphilosophical reflection. Well, she said, it's called their hit-or-miss pattern, but it's hit oftener and it's miss. It's hit oftener and it is miss. There ain't any accounting for their way their breads'll come. Breads'll come? Sometimes pairs like two was kinda magic when they ain't so together, and I allowed that's the way it's going to be with heaps of things in this life. It's just a kinda hit or miss pattern we are all honest living on. Tain't much use trying to reckon how it all come about, but the bread dues fit heaps better than your thing. Come to sew 'em, tain't never no such colors as your thought till was going to be, but it's always pretty. It's always pretty. I always never see a hit or miss pattern in my life yet that wasn't pretty. And there weren't never nobody fetch me rags and had 'em all planned out in just the way they wanted them warp, and just how their stripes was to come and all that. They want orful disserpented when they come to see it done, and it never looks they thought it would never. I learned that lesson early, and I allows make 'em write it out on paper, just the width and every stripe and each of their colors, so they can see it's what they ordered, or else they ought to say I hadn't wove it till I was told to. I got catched that way once. I allowed anybody's a bomb fools gets catched twice running the same way, but from me I'll take the hit and miss pattern every time, sir, straight along. When the carpet was done, Henri took the roll in her own independent arms and strode with it to the agent's house. She had been biding the time when she should have this excuse for going there. Her mind was burning with questions she wished to ask, information she wished to give, and she chose an hour when she knew she would find the agent himself at home. I allow you here while I was behind the time with this here carpet, she said. I was up to San Jacinto Mountain where that engine was murdered. We brung his wider and their baby down with us, me and her brother. He took her home to her house to live. He's real well off. Yes, the agent had heard this. He had wondered why the widow did not come to see him. He had expected to hear from her. Well, I didn't hint to her that perhaps you could do something if she was to tell you all about it, but she allowed there weren't any use in talking. The judge, he said, her witnessing wouldn't be worth nothing to no jury, and that was what I was a-wanting to ask you, if that was so. Yes, that is the way lawyers here told me, said the agent. I was going to have the man arrested, but they said it would be folly to bring the case to trial. The woman's testimony would not be believed. You've got power to get a man punished for selling whiskey to Indians, I noticed, broken Henri, ain't you? I see your man, the marshal here, arresting him pretty lively last month. They said was your doing. You was a-going to prosecute every living son of a hell. Them was their words. They sold whiskey to Indians. That's so, said the agent. So I am. I am determined to break up this vile business of selling whiskey to Indians. It is no use trying to do anything for them while they are made drunk in this way. It's a sin and a shame. That's so. I allow to you, said Henri. There ain't any gainsaying that. But if you got power to get a man put in jail for selling whiskey to Indian, ain't got power to get him punished if he goes and kills that Indian? It seems to me there's something curious about that. That is just the trouble in my position here, Henri, he said. I have no real power over my Indians as I ought to have. What makes you call them your Indians, broke in Henri? The agent colored, like he got fucking started blushing. The agent colored. Henri was a privileged character, but a logical method of questioning was inconvenient. I only mean that they are under my charge, he said. I don't mean that they belong to me in any way. Why, I allow not, retorted Henri, any more than I do. There erring in their living, such as is, if you can call it a living. I've been amongst them now, this here last 2 weeks, and I allow I've had my eyes open to some things. What's that doter of yourn? Him that they call the agency doctor, what's he got to do? To attend to the Indians of this agency when they are sick, replied the agent promptly. Well, that's what I hearin'. That's what you said afore, and that's why Alessandro the engine that was murdered, that's why he put his name down in your books, though to win again him orful to do it. He was high-spirited, and he allers took care himself, but he been drove out or fuss one place and then another till he got clear down and poor, and he just begged that doctor of yourn to go to see his little gal, and the doctor wouldn't, and more than that, he laughed at him for asking, and they set the little thing on the host to bring her here, and she died before they come a mile with her, until was that on top of her all the rest drove Alessandro crazy. He never had none or them wandering spells till after that. Now I allow that wasn't right or that doctor. I wouldn't have no such doctors that around my agency if I was you. Perhaps you never heard of that. I told Ramoni I didn't believe you know it, or you'd have made him go. No, Aunt Ree, said the agent. I could not have done that. He is only required to doctor such Indians as come here. I allow then there ain't any great use in having him at all, said Aunt Ree. Pairs like that ain't more'n a handful of Injuns around here. I expect he gets well paid. And she paused for an answer. None came. The agent did not feel himself obliged to reveal to Aunt Ree what the salary the government paid the San Bernardino doctor for sending haphazard prescriptions to Indians he never saw. After a pause, Aunt Ree resumed. If it ain't any offense to you, I allow I'd like to know just what 'tis your air here to do for these Indians. I got my feeling considerable stirred up being among them, and knowing this here your one that's been murdered. Heave you got any power to give them anything, food or such? They are powerful poor, most of them. I have had a little fun for buying supplies for them in times of special suffering, replied the agent. A very little, and the department has appropriated some money for wagons and plows. Not enough, however, to supply every village. You see, these Indians are in the main self-supporting. That's just it, persisted Henri. That's what I've been seeing, and that's why I want so bad to get at what 'tis the government means to have you do for 'em. I allow if you ain't to feed 'em, and if you can't put folks into jail for robbing and cheating 'em, not to say killing 'em, if you can't do anything more and keep 'em from getting whiskey, well, I'm free to say, Henri paused. She did not wish to seem to reflect on the agent's usefulness, and so concluded her sentence very differently from her first impulse. I'm free to say I shouldn't like to stand in your shoes. You may very well say that, Henri, laughed the agent complacently. It is the most troublesome agency in the whole list, and the least satisfactory. Well, I allow it mote be the least satisfying, rejoined the indefatigable Aunt Ree. But I don't know where the trouble comes in. If so be there is no more can be done than you was or telling. And she looked honestly puzzled. She's like, why are you even here? Look there, Aunt Ree, said he triumphantly, pointing to a pile of books and papers, all those to be gone through with, and a report to be made out every month, and a voucher to be sent for every lead pencil I buy. I tell you, I work harder than I ever did in my life before, and for less pay. This whole conversation with Aunt Ree is annoying. We don't have that much longer. I allow you have had easy times before then, retorted Aunt Ree, good-naturedly satirical. If you are plumb tired doing that, and she took her leave, not a whit clearer in her mind as to the real nature and function of the Indian agency than she was in the beginning. Sorry. Through all of Ramona's journey home, she seemed to herself to be in a dream, her baby in her arms, the faithful creatures, Baba and Benito, gaily trotting along at a pace so swift that the carriage seemed gliding. Felipe by her side, the dear Felipe, his eyes wearing the same bright and loving look as of old. What strange thing was it which had happened to her to make it all seem unreal? Even the little one in her arms, she too seemed unreal. Ramona did not know it, but her nerves were still partially paralyzed. Nature sends merciful anesthetics in the shocks which almost kill us. And the very sharpness of the blow sometimes lies its own first healing. It would be long before Ramona would fully realize that Alessandro was dead. Her worst anguish was yet to come. Felipe did not know and could not have understood this, and it was with a marveling gratitude that he saw Ramona. Day after day, placid, always ready with a smile when he spoke to her. Her gratitude for each thoughtfulness of his smote him like a reproach, all the more that he knew her gentle heart had never held a thought of reproaching it towards him. Grateful to me, he thought, to me who might have spared her all this woe if I had been strong. Never would Felipe forgive himself, no, not to the day of his death. His whole life should be devoted to her and her child, but what a pitiful thing was that to render. As they drew near home, he saw Ramona often try to conceal from him that she had shed tears. At last he said to her, "Dearest Ramona, do not fear to weep before me. I will not be any constraint on you. It is better for you to let the tears come freely, my sister. They are healing to wounds." "I do not think so, Felipe," replied Ramona. "Tears are only selfish and weak. They are like a cry because we are hurt. It is not possible always to keep them back. But I am ashamed when I have wept, and think also that I have sinned, because I have given a sad sight to others. Father Salvador always said that it was a duty to look happy, no matter how much we might be suffering." "That is more than human power can do," said Felipe. "I think not," replied Ramona. "If it were, Father Salvador would not have commanded it. And do you not recollect, Felipe, what a smile his face always wore, and his heart had been broken for many, many years before he died. Alone in the night when he prayed, he used to weep from the great wrestling he had with God, he told me. But we never saw him except with a smile. When one thinks in the wilderness alone, Felipe, many things become clear. I've been learning all these years in the wilderness as if I had had a teacher. Sometimes I almost thought that the spirit of Father Salvador was by my side, putting thoughts into my mind. I hope I can tell them to my child when she is old enough. She will understand them quicker than I did, for she has Alessandro's soul. You can see that by her eyes, and all these things of which I speak were in his heart from his childhood. They belong to the air and the sky and the sun, and all trees know them." When Ramona spoke thus of Alessandro, Felipe marveled in silence. He himself had been afraid to mention Alessandro's name. But Ramona spoke it as if he were yet by her side. Felipe could not fathom this. There were too many things yet which Felipe could not fathom in this lovely, sorrowing, sunny sister of his. When they reached the house, the servants who had been on the watch for days were all gathered in the courtyard. Old Marta and Juan Can heading the group. Only two absent, Margarita and Luigo. They had been married some months before. That's right, and we're living at the Ortegna's ranch, where Luigo, to Juan Can's scornful amusement, had been made head shepherd. It's gonna be kind of hard for Margarita. She's always gonna live with a fucked up conscience whenever she sees Ramona, you know? On all sides were beaming faces, smiles, and glad cries of greeting. Underneath these were affectionate hearts quaking with fear lest the homecoming be but a sad one after all. Vaguely they knew a little of what their dear señorita had been through since she left them. It seemed that she must be sadly altered by so much sorrow, and that it would be terrible to her to come back to the place so full of painful associations. "And the señora gone too?" said one of the outdoor hands as they were talking it over. "It's not the same place at all that it was when the señora was here." "Humph," muttered Juan Can, more consequential and overbearing than ever for this year of absolute control of the estate. "Humph, that's all you know. A good thing the señora died when she did, I can tell you. We never have seen the señorita back here else. I can tell you that, my man. And for my part, I'd much rather be under Señor Felipe and the señorita than under the señora. Peace to her ashes. She had her day. They can have theirs now." Juan Can's a fool. He reminds me of one of those instigator Disney characters. When these loving and excited retainers saw Ramona, pale but with her own old smile on her face, coming towards them with her babe in her arms, they broke into wild cheering, and there was not a dry eye in the group. Singling out old Marta by a glance, Ramona held out the baby towards her and said in her old, gentle, affectionate voice, "I am sure you will love my baby, Marta. Señorita, señorita, God bless you, señorita." They cried and closed up their rank around the baby, touching her, praising her, handing her from one to the other. Well, Marta is Margarita's mom. Ramona stood for a few seconds watching them, then she said, "Give her to me, Marta. I will myself carry her into the house." And she moved towards the inner door. "This way, dear, this way," cried Felipe. "It is Father Salvador's room I ordered to be prepared for you, because it is so sunny for the baby." "Thanks, kind Felipe," cried Ramona, and her eyes said more than her words. She knew he had divined the one thing she had most dreaded in returning, the crossing again the threshold of her own room. It would be long now before she would enter that room. Perhaps she would never enter it. How tender and wise of Felipe. Yes, Felipe was both tender and wise now. How long would the wisdom hold the tenderness in leash, as he day after day looked upon the face of this beautiful woman, so much more beautiful now than she had ever been before her marriage, that Felipe sometimes, as he gazed at her, thought her changed even in feature, but in this very change lay a spell which would for a long time surround her, and set her as apart from lovers' thoughts as if she were guarded by a cordon of viewless spirits. There was a rapt look of Holy Communion on her face, which made itself felt by the dullest perception, and sometimes overawed even where it attracted. It was the same thing which Henri had felt and formulated in her own humorous fashion, but old Marada put it better, when one day in reply to a half-terrified, low-whispered suggestion of Juan Can to the effect that it was a great pity the Señor Felipe hadn't married the Señorita years ago. What if he were to do it yet, she said, she said, also under her breath. It is my opinion he'd as soon think of St. Catherine herself, not but that it would be a great thing if it could be. Let me charge my phone real quick. Got like 10 more minutes. Fuck you, those people. The lames. There we go. So, and now the thing that the Senora had imagined or imaged to herself so often had come about, the presence of a little child in her house. On the veranda, in the garden, everywhere, the sunny, joyous, blessed presence, but how differently had it come. Not Felipe's child as she probably had pictured, but the child of Ramona, the friendless, banished Ramona returned now into full honor and peace as the daughter of the house. Ramona, widow of Alessandro, if the child had been Felipe's own, he could not have felt for it a greater love. From the first, the little thing had clung to him as only second to her mother. She slept hours in his arms, one little hand hid in his dark beard, close to his lips, and kissed again and again when no one saw. Next to Ramona herself and Felipe's heart came Ramona's child. And on the child he could lavish the fondness he felt that he could never dare to show to the mother. Month by month it grew clearer to Felipe that the mainsprings of Ramona's life were no longer of this earth, that she walked as one in constant fellowship with one unseen. Her frequent and calm mention of Alessandro did not deceive him. It did not mean a lesson in grief, it meant an unchanged relation. One thing weighed heavily on Felipe's mind, the concealed treasure, a sense of humiliation withheld him day after day from speaking of it, but he could have no peace until Ramona knew it. Each hour that he delayed the revelation, he found himself almost as guilty as he had held his mother's to be, or as guilty as he held his mother to be. You know, talking about the treasure that was left to Ramona as a baby, but the Señora didn't give it to her. At last he spoke. He had not said many words before Ramona interrupted him. "Oh yes," she said, "I knew about those things. Your mother told me. When we were in such trouble, I used to wish sometimes we could have had a few of those jewels, but they were all given to the church. That was what the Señora Ortegna said must be done with them if I married against your mother's wishes." It was with a shame-stricken voice that Felipe replied, "Dear Ramona, they were not given to the church. You know Father Salvadera died, and I suppose my mother did not know what to do with them. She told me about them just as she was dying." "But why did you not give them to the church, dear?" asked Ramona simply. "Why?" cried Felipe. "Because I hold them to be yours and yours only. I would never have given them to the church until I had sure proof that you were dead and had left no children." Ramona's eyes were fixed earnestly on Felipe's face. "You have not read the Señora Tegna's letter," she said. "Yes, I have," he replied, "every word of it. But that said, I was not to have any of the things if I married against the Señora Moreno's will." Felipe groaned. Had his mother lied? "No, dear," he said. "That was not the word. It was if you married unworthily." Ramona reflected. "I never recollected the word," she said. "I was too frightened, but I thought that was what it meant. I did not marry unworthily. Do you feel sure, Felipe, that it would be honest for me to take them for my child?" "Perfectly," said Felipe. "Do you think Father Salvadera would say I ought to keep them?" "I am sure of it, dear." "I will think about it, Felipe. I cannot decide hastily. Your mother did not think I had any right to them if I married Alessandro. That was why she showed them to me. I never knew of them till then. I took one thing, a handkerchief of my father's. I was very glad to have it, but it got lost when we went from San Pasqual. Alessandro rode back a half-day's journey to find it for me, but it had blown away. I grieved sorely for it. The next day, Ramona said to Felipe, "Dear Felipe, I have thought it all over about those jewels. I believe it will be right for my daughter to have them. Can there be some kind of a paper written for me to sign to say that if she dies, they are all to be given to the church, to Father Salvadera's college in Santa Barbara? That is where I would rather have them go." "Yes, dear," said Felipe, "and then we will put them in some after place. I will take them to Los Angeles when I go. It is wonderful no one has stolen them all these years." And so a second time the Ortegna jewels were passed on by a written bequest into the keeping of that mysterious, certain, uncertain thing we call the future, and delude ourselves with the fancy that we can have much to do with its shaping. Okay, now we have some sort of you know, closure, because it's like it's not a new chapter, but it's like a new closure, you know. So life ran smoothly in the Moreno household. Smoothly to the eye. Nothing could be more peaceful, fair to see than the routine of its days, with the simple pleasures, light tasks, and easy diligence of all. Summer and winter were alike sunny and had each its own joys. There was not an antagonistic or jarring element, and flitting back and forth from veranda to veranda, garden to garden, room to room, equally at home and equally welcome everywhere, there went perpetually running, frisking, laughing, rejoicing the little child that had so strangely drifted into this happy shelter. The little Ramona, as unconscious of aught, A-U-G-H-T, sad or fateful in her destiny as the blossoms with which it was her delight to play. She sometimes seemed to her mother to have been from the first in some mysterious way disconnected from it, removed, set free from all that could ever by any possibility link her to sorrow. Ramona herself bore no impress of sorrow. Rather, her face had now an added radiance. There had been a period soon after her return when she felt that she, for the first time, waked to the realization of her bereavement, when every sight, sound, and place seemed to cry out, mocking her with the name and the memory of Alessandro. But she wrestled with this absorbing grief as with a sin, setting her will steadfastly to the purposes of each day's duty, and most of all to the duty of joyfulness. She repeated to herself Father Salvador's sayings till she more than knew them by heart, and she spent long hours of the night in prayer, as if it had been this wont to do. No one but Felipe dreamed of these vigils and wrestlings. He knew them, and he knew too when they ceased, and the new light of a new victory diffused itself over Ramona's face. But neither did the first dishearten nor the latter encourage him. Felipe was a clear-sighted lover now than he had been in his earlier youth. He knew that into the world where Ramona really lived he did not so much as enter. Yet her every act, word, look was full of loving thoughtfulness of and for him, loving happiness in his companionship. And while this was so, all Felipe's unrest could not make him unhappy. There were other causes entering into his unrest besides his yearning desire to win Ramona for his wife. Year by year, the conditions of life in California were growing more distasteful to him. The methods, aims, standards of the fast-incoming Americans were to him odious. Their boasted successes, the crowding of colonies, schemes of settlement and development, all were disagreeable and irritating. The passion for money and reckless spending of it, the great fortunes made in 1 hour, thrown away in another, savored to Felipe's mind more of brigandage, and gambling than of the occupations of gentlemen. Brigandage. Oh, right here. Brigandage and gambling. Well, it comes from the word brigade, right? So brigandage. Probably the act of the brigade. So brigandage, and gambling, then of the occupations of gentlemen. He loathed them. Life under the new government grew more and more intolerable to him. Both his hereditary instincts and prejudices and his temperament revolted. He found himself more and more alone in the country. Even the Spanish tongue was less and less spoken. He was beginning to yearn for Mexico, which he had never seen, yet yearned for like an exile. There he might yet live among men of his own race and degree, and of congenial beliefs and occupations. Whenever he thought of this change, always came the quick memory of Ramona. Would she be willing to go? Could it be that she felt a bond to this land in which she had known nothing but suffering? At last he asked her. To his unutterable surprise, Ramona cried, "Felipe, the saints be praised, I should never have told you. I did not think that you would wish to leave this estate, but my most beautiful dream for Ramona would be that she should grow up in Mexico." And as she spoke, Felipe understood by a lightning intuition and wondered that he had not foreknown it, that she would spare her daughter the burden she had gladly, heroically borne herself in the bond of race. The question was settled with gladness of heart, almost more than he could have believed possible. Felipe at once communicated with some rich American proprietors who had desired to buy the Moreno estate. Land in the valley had so greatly advanced in value that the sum he received for it was larger than he had dared to hope, was ample for the realization of all his plans for the new life in Mexico. From the hour that this was determined and the time for their sailing fixed, a new expression came into Ramona's face. Her imagination was kindled. An untried future beckoned, a future which she would embrace and conquer for her daughter. Felipe saw the look, felt the change, and for the first time hoped it would be a new world, a new life. Why not a new love? She cannot always be blind to his devotion, and when she saw it, because she refused to reward it, he would be very patient and wait long, he thought. Surely since he had been patient so long without hope, he could still be more patient now that hope had dawned. But patience is not hope's province in breasts of lovers. From the day when Felipe first thought to himself, she will yet be mine, it grew harder and not easier for him to refrain from pouring out his love in words. Her tender sisterliness, which had been such balm and comfort to him, grew at times intolerable, and again her gentle spirit was deeply disquieted with the fear that she had displeased him. So strangely did he conduct himself. He had resolved that nothing should tempt him to disclose to her his passions and his dreams until they had reached their new home. But there came a moment which mastered him, and he spoke. It was in Monterey. They were to sail on the morrow, and had been on board the ship to complete the last arrangements. They were rowed back to shore in a little boat. A full moon shone. Ramona sat bareheaded in the end of the boat, and the silver radiance from the water seemed to float up around her and invest her as with a myriad halos. Felipe gazed at her till his senses swam, and when, on stepping from the boat, she put her hand in his and said, as she had said 100 times before, "Dear Felipe, how good you are." He clasped her hands wildly and cried, "Ramona, my love, oh, can you not love me?" There's somebody over there. The moonlight was bright as day. They were alone on the shore. Ramona gazed at him for 1 second in surprise. Only for a second, then she knew all. "Felipe, my brother," she cried, and stretched out her hands as if in warning. "No, I am not your brother," he cried. "I will not be your brother. I would rather die." Felipe cried Ramona. Oh no, Felipe cried Ramona again. This time her voice recalled him to himself. It was a voice of terror and of pain. "Forgive me, my sweet one," he exclaimed. "I will never say it again, but I have loved you so long, so long." Ramona's head had fallen forward on her breast, her eyes fixed on the shining sands. The waves rose and fell at her feet, gently as sighs. A great revelation had come to Ramona. In this supreme moment of Felipe's abandonment of all disguises, she saw his whole past life in a new light. Remorse smote her. "Dear Felipe," she said, clasping her hands, "I have been very selfish. I did not know." "Of course you did not love," said Felipe. "Of course you did not love," said Felipe. "How could you? But I have never loved anyone else. I've always loved you. Can you not learn to love me? I did not mean to tell you for a long time yet, but now I have spoken. I cannot hide it anymore." Ramona drew nearer to him, still with her hands clasped. "I have always loved you," she said. "I love no other living man but Felipe." Her voice sank to a solemn whisper. "Do you not know, Felipe, that part of me is dead? Dead. He can never live again. You cannot want me for your wife, Felipe, when part of me is dead." Felipe threw his arms around her. He was beside himself with joy. "You would not say that if you did not think you could be my wife," he cried. "Only give yourself to me, my love. I care not whether you call yourself dead or alive." Ramona stood quietly in his arms. Ah, well for Felipe that he did not know, never could know, the Ramona that Alessandro had known. This gentle, faithful, grateful Ramona, asking herself fervently now if she would do her brother a wrong, yielding up to him what seemed to her only the broken fragment of a life, weighing his words not in the light of passion, but of calmest, most unselfish affection. Ah, how unlike was she to that Ramona who flung herself on Alessandro's breast, crying, "Take me with you, I would rather die than have you leave me." It's fucked up. Ramona had spoken truth. Part of her was dead, but Ramona saw now with infallible intuition that even as she had loved Alessandro, so Felipe loved her. Because she refused to give Felipe happiness when he had saved her child. What else now remained for them? These words having been spoken, "I will be your wife, dear Felipe," she said, speaking solemnly, slowly. "If you are sure it will make you happy, and if you think it is right." "Right," ejaculated Felipe, mad with the joy unlooked for so soon. "Nothing else would be right, my Ramona. I will love you so, you will forget you ever said that part of you was dead." A strange look which startled Felipe swept across Ramona's face. It might have been a moonbeam. Moonbeam. It passed. Felipe never saw it again. General Moreno's name was still held in warm remembrance in the city of Mexico, and Felipe found himself at once among friends. On the day after their arrival, he and Ramona were married in the cathedral, old Marada and Juan Can with his crutches kneeling in proud joy behind them. The story of the romance of their lives being widely rumored greatly enhanced the interest with which they were welcomed. The beautiful young Señora Moreno was the theme of the city, and Felipe's bosom thrilled with pride to see the gentle dignity of demeanor by which she was distinguished in all assemblages. It was indeed a new world, a new life. Ramona might well doubt her own identity, but undying memories stood like sentinels in her breast. When the notes of doves calling to each other fell in her ear, her eyes sought the sky, and she heard a voice saying, Mahela. This was the only secret her loyal, loving heart had kept from Felipe. A loyal, loving heart indeed it was. Loyal, loving, serene. Few husbands so blessed as the Señor Felipe Moreno. Sons and daughters came to bear his name. The daughters were all beautiful, but the most beautiful of them all. And it was said the most beloved by both father and mother was the eldest one, the one who bore the mother's name, and was only stepdaughter to the Señor, Ramona. Ramona, daughter of Alessandro the Indian. I don't know. Felipe loved her, man. Fucking Felipe. He turned out to be the blessed one, man. Alessandro had to die, huh? It's fucked up. But she would have lived a hard life with Alessandro. She would have lived a tough life with him. Yeah, he ends up going, though. It's crazy. I had a homie, he had, it's like it's his wife now, but I had a homie who just, not like street homie, he was just, we used to work together, we became friends by working together, and he told me that his baby mama, his wife, she would tell him like, oh, you know, if so-and-so didn't die, I wouldn't have been with you. She had a boyfriend that she was really in love with, he ended up dying. And my homie knew about it, but you know, it's just something you deal with. So it reminds me of this. But yeah, man, fucking Felipe. Like, you know, the selfish part of me thinks about like, damn, man, would Alessandro be cool with that? You know what I mean? Like if he was still alive, or I don't know. And also my biological father, he had a homie who he had kids with this lady who had 2 kids before him, but you know, he raised them since they were real young. But that was, his homie died, and his homie said, oh, look after my family, and he ended up getting with, I mean, I guess if you're dead, you don't know about it, so I don't know, it just kind of, that part kind of bothers me a little bit, but I don't know. It's a good book. I wanted to take a picture and post that last portion of it. It was real poetic. Anyway, peace.